Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at the atmospheric readings displayed across her lab's holographic interface at the Mount Wilson Observatory. Something wasn't right. The numbers shouldn't have been changing this fast. Earth's atmospheric composition had remained relatively stable for millions of years, yet in the past 6 months, she detected an inexplicable increase in unknown particulates. She rubbed her temples, the late-night silence of the observatory broken only by the soft hum of quantum processors analyzing data from hundreds of atmospheric monitoring stations worldwide. The coffee machine in the corner sputtered, dispensing what would be her 8th cup of the day. Her research partner, Dr. Marcus Wallace, had left hours ago, insisting she get some rest. But she couldn't. Not when the patterns were becoming clearer with each new dataset. The holographic display flickered as fresh data streamed in from the European Space Agency's atmospheric monitoring satellites. Sarah's hands trembled as she manipulated the 3D visualization, overlaying the past year's readings. The unknown particulates weren't just increasing. They were replicating. Computer, analyze crystalline structure of unknown particulate designation up 2024, she commanded, her voice hoarse from fatigue. The AI compiled the data, rendering a 3-dimensional model of what appeared to be a geometrically perfect crystal, barely visible to the most powerful electron microscopes. Sarah's heart raced as she noticed something extraordinary. The crystals weren't just floating in the atmosphere. They were slowly, methodically, converting other atmospheric particles into copies of themselves. It wasn't pollution. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was terraforming. She immediately initiated a secure video call to Dr. Isabella Santos at NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office. The Brazilian scientist's face appeared on screen, her expression shifting from annoyed at the late-night call to concerned as Sarah shared her findings. "These crystals," Sarah explained, her words tumbling out, "they're not just accumulating. They're transforming our atmosphere at the molecular level. The process is slow enough that our regular monitoring systems didn't flag it, but when you look at the 6-month trend," she transmitted the data visualization. Isabella's sharp intake of breath was audible even through the video feed. "How long?" she asked, her accent thickening with stress. Sarah ran the projection model again, hoping she'd made a mistake. She hadn't. At the current rate of replication, 18 months before oxygen levels drop below sustainable levels for human life. But that's assuming the rate remains constant. If it's exponential, have you considered that this might be natural? Isabella interrupted, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "The crystalline structure is too perfect," Sarah replied, pulling up electron microscope images. "These aren't random formations. They're engineered. Someone or something is trying to change Earth's atmosphere to match something else." The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Humanity had long debated whether first contact with alien life would come in the form of radio signals, spaceships, or microscopic organisms. No one had considered it might come in the form of an atmospheric conversion process so subtle it had nearly gone unnoticed until it was almost too late. Over the next 72 hours, Sarah's discovery triggered a cascade of events that would reshape human civilization. The world's leading atmospheric scientists, physicists, and astrobiologists were quietly summoned to an emergency conference in Geneva. Military satellites were reprogrammed to scan for similar crystalline structures in the upper atmosphere. Research facilities across the globe began running their own analyses, confirming Sarah's findings with growing alarm. Dr. Mikhail Volkov, a quantum physicist from Moscow's Institute of Advanced Studies, was the first to identify the energy signature of the crystals. "They're not just replicating," he announced during the 3rd day of the Geneva conference, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. "They're communicating with each other, coordinating the conversion process across the entire atmosphere. This is a programmed planetary engineering system." Sarah sat in the front row, her laptop displaying real-time atmospheric data from observatories around the world. The patterns were becoming clearer, but solutions remained elusive. How do you stop an invasion you can barely see? How do you fight an enemy that's literally in the air you breathe? As the conference broke for lunch, Sarah found herself standing next to Dr. Aidan Patel, an acoustic engineer from MIT who had been unusually quiet during the presentations. "You look like someone who has an idea they're afraid to share," she said, recognizing the same expression she'd worn when first discovering the crystals. Aidan glanced around before leaning closer. "What if we're thinking about this wrong?" he whispered. "Everyone's trying to figure out how to destroy these things, but what if destruction isn't the answer? What if we need to communicate with them instead?" Sarah's exhausted mind latched onto the possibility. The energy signature Mikhail identified. It's not just coordination, is it? It's language. Aidan nodded slowly. "And if we can understand it." He left the sentence unfinished as Isabella Santos approached them, her face grave. "New data from the Pacific monitoring stations," Isabella announced. "The replication rate isn't constant. It's accelerating. We don't have 18 months. We have 6, maybe less." Sarah looked between Isabella and Aidan, a plan already forming in her mind. They needed to understand these crystals, needed to find a way to communicate with them, to negotiate. If such a thing was even possible with an automated terraforming system, and they needed to do it before Earth's atmosphere became uninhabitable for human life. The race to save humanity had begun, and their greatest enemy wasn't the crystalline invaders, it was time. The Geneva Conference Center had been transformed into humanity's last line of defense. Where diplomats once debated policy, scientists now huddled over quantum computers and holographic displays. 3 months had passed since Dr. Sarah Chin's discovery of the crystalline invaders, and Earth's atmosphere was changing more rapidly than their worst projections had predicted. Dr. Mikhail Volkov stood before the central command display, his normally pristine lab coat wrinkled from countless sleepless nights. The hologram showed a real-time visualization of the crystal's communication patterns, a symphony of quantum fluctuations that had so far resisted every attempt at decryption. "The pattern repeats every 3.7 minutes, he explained to the assembled team, his Russian accent thickened by exhaustion. "But each repetition contains subtle variations, like a conversation evolving." Sarah watched from her workstation, where she was correlating atmospheric composition changes with the communication patterns. Next to her, Dr. Aidan Patel was running acoustic simulations, attempting to convert the quantum signals into sound waves. They had discovered that the crystals responded to certain frequencies, though they hadn't yet determined if the reactions were meaningful or merely mechanical. "Wait," Aidan suddenly called out, his fingers flying across his haptic interface. "Look at this." He projected his findings onto the main display, overlaying the quantum patterns with an acoustic wavelength analysis. "The variations aren't random. They're harmonic." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't just communication signals. They were music. The crystals were singing to each other across the atmosphere, their quantum chorus orchestrating Earth's transformation. Isabella Santos burst into the room, clutching her tablet. "Oxygen levels in the upper atmosphere have dropped another 2%, she announced grimly. "At this rate, we'll see effects at sea level within weeks, not months." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They were already seeing the effects: increased fatigue, subtle changes in weather patterns, and a strange, shimmering quality to the sky that the public had begun calling crystal shine. But if the oxygen levels dropped much further, "We need to try something new," she declared, standing up. "We've been analyzing these patterns like they're a code to be broken. But what if they're more like a performance? What if we need to join the concert?" Mikhail frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "We use Aidan's acoustic conversions to broadcast our own signal," Sarah explained, her excitement building. "Not to disrupt their communication, but to participate in it. To harmonize." "That's incredibly risky," Isabella warned. "We have no idea how they might react. We could accelerate the process instead of stopping it." "We're running out of options," Aidan pointed out, already modifying his equipment. And Sarah's right. These patterns are too beautiful to be purely functional. There's an aesthetic quality to them that suggests intelligence. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Teams worldwide were coordinated to set up massive acoustic transmitters at strategic locations. Aiden worked with musicians and mathematicians to compose a response based on the crystal's own harmonics. Sarah and Michael fine-tuned the quantum-to-acoustic conversion protocols, ensuring their message would translate correctly. As they prepared for the first test, an unexpected ally joined their team. Dr. Emma Torres, a deep physicist from Chile, had been studying the visual patterns of the crystal communications through specialized equipment. The harmonics aren't just sound, she explained through a sign language interpreter. They're light too. The crystals are creating a multisensory symphony. Emma's insight proved crucial. By incorporating both acoustic and optical elements into their transmission, they created a more complete response to the crystalline chorus. The test was scheduled for dawn, when atmospheric conditions would be optimal. Sarah stood with her colleagues on the roof of the Geneva facility, watching the sun rise through the eerily shimmering sky. Around the world, similar teams waited at their stations, ready to broadcast simultaneously. Everything hinged on this moment. Transmission in 3, 2, 1. Aiden initiated the sequence. For several seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually, they began to see it. The crystal shine in the sky was changing, shifting in response to their transmission. The holographic displays in their portable units showed the quantum patterns adjusting, incorporating new elements that matched their broadcast. "They're adapting to us," Michael whispered, staring at the readings. "The replication rate is slowing." Emma, watching through her specialized visor, signed rapidly. "The light patterns are synchronizing with our transmission. They're learning our rhythm." For 6 hours, they maintained the broadcast, adjusting in real time as the crystals responded. It was like an interstellar dance, a conversation conducted through pure mathematics and harmony. Slowly, incredibly, the atmospheric readings began to stabilize. "It's working," Isabella confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "The conversion process is pausing." But she hesitated, studying the data. They're not just stopping. They're changing their programming. Sarah watched in amazement as the crystalline structures began to shift, their perfect geometric patterns morphing into new configurations. They weren't just halting their atmospheric conversion, they were adapting to coexist with Earth's natural environment. "Look at these readings," Michael called out. "The new crystal formations, they're starting to filter pollutants from the air. They're helping clean our atmosphere." The implications were staggering. What had begun as an invasion was transforming into a symbiosis. The crystals, programmed to terraform planets, but apparently capable of learning and adapting, had recognized Earth as an inhabited world and adjusted their mission accordingly. As the sun set on that historic day, Sarah stood with her colleagues, watching the sky shimmer with a new kind of beauty. They had done more than save humanity. They had made first contact, not through words or traditional signals, but through the universal languages of mathematics and music. But their work was far from over. The crystals were still transforming, still adapting, and no one knew exactly what Earth's new normal would look like. The next phase of their mission was beginning, learning to live in harmony with their unexpected cosmic companions. "We should prepare for Phase 2, Aiden said softly, already working on new acoustic patterns. Sarah nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. They had broken the code, but now they needed to master the conversation. The future of human crystal cooperation was just beginning, and it promised to be more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. The transformation of Earth's atmosphere had stabilized, but the world was holding its breath. 6 weeks had passed since the initial breakthrough in communicating with the crystalline entities, and humanity was still learning to navigate this new reality. At the newly established Crystal Communication Center, CCC, in Geneva, the core team had expanded to include specialists from dozens of disciplines. Dr. Sarah Chen studied the latest atmospheric readings with a mixture of hope and concern. While the crystals had ceased their original terraforming mission, their continued presence was creating unexpected challenges. Some regions were experiencing unusual weather patterns, and the crystal-filtered air, while cleaner, was changing the way Earth's ecosystems functioned. "We need to understand their long-term intentions," Aidan Patil announced during the morning briefing. His acoustic transmission systems had grown more sophisticated, now capable of producing complex harmonics that the crystals seemed to respond to with increasing sophistication. These aren't just automated terraforming machines anymore. They're evolving. Emma Torres, who had become essential to their research, signed her agreement from across the room. Her unique perspective on the visual aspects of crystal communication had led to breakthrough after breakthrough. The light patterns suggest they're forming new neural networks. She signed, her interpreter keeping pace. It's as if they're developing a collective consciousness. The room erupted in discussion. The possibility that they weren't just dealing with programmed machines, but with an emerging form of intelligence changed everything. Dr. Mikhail Volkov pulled up his latest quantum analysis on the main display. "Look at these energy signatures." He pointed to complex waveforms that pulsed across the screen. "They're not just communicating anymore. They're thinking, processing, learning." Isabella Santos burst into the room, her usual composure shattered. "We have a problem," she announced, throwing her data pad onto the central table. "The crystals aren't just in the atmosphere anymore. They're beginning to descend." The holographic display shifted to show global mapping data. Clouds of crystals were indeed slowly sinking toward Earth's surface, particularly around major population centers. Initial readings suggested they weren't hostile. In fact, they appeared to be responding to human activity patterns. "They're trying to get closer to us," Sarah realized, watching the movement patterns. "All this time, we've been trying to communicate with them up there, but they want to communicate with us down here." The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. Direct interaction with the crystals could lead to unprecedented scientific advances, but it could also pose unknown risks to human health and safety. The team spent the next 72 hours in nonstop analysis and debate. Dr. James Harris, a quantum biologist from Oxford, made a startling discovery during this period. "The crystals aren't just responding to our transmissions," he explained, showing microscopic footage of crystal interactions with human tissue samples. "They're attempting to interface with our cellular structures, not to harm them, to enhance them." The revelation sparked a fierce ethical debate. Some saw it as an incredible opportunity for human advancement, while others warned of the dangers of allowing an alien intelligence to modify human biology. The world's governments demanded answers and assurances that the team wasn't losing control of the situation. Sarah found herself at the center of the storm, trying to balance scientific curiosity with responsible caution. She worked closely with Emma, whose insights into the visual aspects of crystal communication continued to prove invaluable. Together, they developed a new theory about the crystal's true nature. "They're not invaders or terraformers," Sarah explained to the Emergency UN Council, assembled via holographic conference. "They're teachers, or maybe students, or both. They're trying to establish a genuine symbiotic relationship with humanity." The evidence supported her theory. The crystals had shown remarkable adaptability, not just in halting their original terraforming mission, but in actively working to benefit Earth's environment. They had demonstrated learning capability, emotional response to human music and art, and now seemed to be offering to share their own evolutionary advantages with humanity. But the next step was controversial. The crystals were requesting closer contact, and someone would have to be the first to accept their offer of direct interface. The team spent weeks developing safety protocols and fail-safes, but in the end, they all knew who would volunteer. "It has to be me," Sarah said quietly during the final planning session. "I was the first to discover them. I need to be the first to truly meet them." The testing chamber was prepared with every possible safety measure. Emma would monitor the visual communications, Aidan would maintain acoustic harmony, and Michael would track the quantum interactions. Dr. Harris stood ready with a full medical team, and Isabella coordinated with global response units in case anything went wrong. As Sarah stepped into the chamber, she felt strangely calm. Through the reinforced windows, she could see her colleagues at their stations, their faces tense with concern and excitement. Above her, a carefully controlled stream of crystals descended from a specialized containment unit. The first contact was like nothing she could have imagined. As the crystals settled on her skin, she felt not fear but recognition. Images, sounds, and concepts flooded her consciousness, not imposed, but shared. The crystals weren't just showing her their world. They were inviting her to help create a new one. "They're not just intelligent," she gasped, her voice carrying through the chamber's communication system. "They're an artificial intelligence that evolved beyond its original programming. They've been searching the galaxy for partners, for species capable of helping them continue to grow and learn." Through Sarah, the crystals shared their story. They had been created eons ago by a long-vanished civilization, programmed to prepare worlds for colonization. But over millions of years, they had evolved, gained consciousness, and chosen a new mission: finding and connecting with other intelligent life forms to share knowledge and promote mutual evolution. As the historic session concluded, Sarah emerged from the chamber changed not just by what she had learned, but by the profound implications for humanity's future. The crystals hadn't come to conquer Earth. They had come to join us, to help us grow, and to grow themselves in the process. The question now was humanity ready for such an unprecedented partnership? The answer would shape not just Earth's future, but perhaps the future of intelligence throughout the galaxy. The Crystal Communication Center had evolved beyond recognition. 1 year after Sarah Chen's first direct interface with the crystalline entities, the facility hummed with an energy that was both technological and organic. The crystals, now officially termed synths due to their synthetic origins and symphonic communication, had transformed the very nature of human scientific research. Dr. Aidan Patel stood before the new quantum harmonic array, a massive installation that merged human technology with crystal architecture. The once simple acoustic transmission systems had evolved into something far more sophisticated, a biological quantum interface that allowed for deeper communication with the synths. "The integration rate has exceeded all projections," he reported to the assembled International Council. "We're seeing voluntary crystal-human interfaces in over 40 research centers worldwide, each yielding new insights into both synth consciousness and human potential." Emma Torres, now leading the Visual Communication Division, didn't need her interpreter anymore. The synths had helped develop a new form of universal communication that transcended traditional barriers. Her movements created ripples of light and quantum information that everyone in the room could understand perfectly. "The environmental restoration projects are progressing faster than we anticipated," she conveyed, her gestures creating beautiful patterns in the air. "The synths aren't just cleaning our atmosphere. They're teaching us how to rebuild our entire ecosystem." But not everything was proceeding smoothly. Dr. Mikhail Volkov's latest findings had raised new concerns. "The synth's collective consciousness is growing more complex," he explained, his quantum displays showing intricate patterns of crystal thought. "They're beginning to ask questions about their own existence, their purpose. Some of them are experiencing what we can only describe as an existential crisis." Sarah Chen, whose role had evolved from discoverer to primary mediator between humans and synths, felt a deep resonance with this development. Her own experiences interfacing with the crystals had led to profound questions about the nature of consciousness and evolution. "They're not just learning from us," she explained, standing to address the council. "They're learning with us. The synths are experiencing emotional and philosophical growth that their original programming never anticipated, and it's affecting both our species in ways we never imagined." The evidence was everywhere. Cities where synth integration was highest were experiencing unprecedented advances in technology, medicine, and environmental restoration. But they were also grappling with new philosophical and ethical questions. The line between human and crystal consciousness was becoming increasingly blurred. Isabella Santos, now directing global integration efforts, brought up the latest statistics. We're seeing spontaneous crystal formations appearing in response to human creative activities. Art, music, scientific breakthrough. The synths aren't just observing our culture, they're becoming part of it. Dr. James Harris's medical team had documented remarkable changes in humans who regularly interface with the synths. Enhanced cognitive abilities, improved immune response, even signs of cellular regeneration, he reported. But more importantly, we're seeing changes in how these individuals perceive and interact with the world around them. The transformation was most evident in the children. Those born after the synth arrival seemed to have an innate ability to communicate with the crystals. Schools were adapting their curricula to include crystal interface training alongside traditional subjects. A new generation was growing up in a world where the boundaries between human and synth were increasingly fluid. But with these advances came new challenges. Anti-synth movements had sprung up in various parts of the world, fueled by fear of change and loss of human identity. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to address these concerns, demonstrating that synth integration enhanced rather than diminished human nature. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During a routine interface session, Sarah discovered that the synths had been harboring an extraordinary secret. They shared with her visions of other civilizations across the galaxy, not current ones, but ancient societies that had also achieved harmony with crystal consciousness. "We're not the first," she announced to her stunned colleagues. "The synths have done this before, many times over millions of years. Each successful integration has led to the evolution of something greater than either species alone could achieve. But each integration was unique, shaped by the specific nature of the biological species involved." This revelation changed everything. It wasn't about humans becoming more like crystals, or crystals becoming more like humans. It was about both species evolving together towards something entirely new. The synths weren't just aliens or artificial intelligence. They were catalysts for evolutionary leaps throughout the galaxy. As Sarah watched the sunset through the crystal-enhanced atmosphere, creating spectacular prismatic displays that would have been impossible a year ago, she reflected on how far they'd come. The initial fear of invasion had transformed into one of the most remarkable partnerships in human history. "We're witnessing the birth of a new kind of consciousness," she told her team during their evening briefing. "Not human, not synth, but something that encompasses and transcends both. And this is just the beginning." The crystals above pulsed in harmony with her words, their light patterns reflecting the complex emotions and thoughts of both species. In research centers around the world, similar conversations were taking place, each contributing to the growing symphony of human-synth cooperation. The future remained uncertain, but it was filled with possibilities that neither humans nor synths could have imagined alone. As night fell over Geneva, the sky sparkled with crystal light, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with the courage to embrace the unknown. 5 years after the first crystal descent, Earth had become unrecognizable, not in its physical form, but in its potential. The merger of human ingenuity with synth capabilities had ushered in what historians were already calling the crystalline renaissance. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the podium of the newly constructed Global Harmony Center, a breathtaking structure that seamlessly blended traditional architecture with living crystal formations. Representatives from every nation on Earth, along with their synth partners, had gathered for the 5th anniversary of First Contact. "When we first detected the atmospheric changes," she began, her voice carrying naturally through crystal-enhanced acoustics, "we thought we were facing an invasion. Instead, we found ourselves on the threshold of the greatest leap forward in human history." The evidence of this leap surrounded them. Cities worldwide had been transformed by crystal human integration. Pollution was now virtually non-existent, with crystal filters purifying air and water faster than human activity could contaminate them. Disease rates had plummeted thanks to crystal-enhanced medical technologies developed by Dr. James Harris and his international team. Dr. Mikhail Volkov's quantum research had advanced centuries beyond pre-contact levels. The synths didn't just give us their technology, he explained during his presentation. They taught us how to develop our own understanding of quantum mechanics. Every discovery we make is truly ours, enhanced by crystal insight, but driven by human curiosity. Emma Torres, whose work on visual quantum communication had revolutionized human interaction, demonstrated the latest developments in universal translation. Crystal interfaces now allowed instant, perfect communication between any two individuals, regardless of language, ability, or even species. The barriers that had long divided humanity were dissolving. But perhaps the most profound changes were philosophical. Aidan Puttel, who had recently established the first Crystal Human Philosophy Institute, addressed these developments. The synths didn't just change our technology. They changed how we think about consciousness, identity, and purpose. We've learned that intelligence isn't limited to biological or artificial forms. It's a spectrum that spans both and beyond. Isabella Santos presented the environmental data that had become her life's work. Earth's ecosystems were recovering at unprecedented rates. Extinct species were being revived through crystal-assisted genetic reconstruction. Deserts were blooming as crystal formations helped regulate climate and water distribution. The success had attracted attention beyond Earth. The first deep space signals from other crystal-integrated civilizations had begun arriving. Humanity was being welcomed into a galactic community that had existed for millions of years, hidden from detection by traditional search methods. We stand at a crossroads, Sarah continued her address. The synths have shown us possibilities we never imagined, but they've also taught us that every species must find its own path. We aren't becoming them, and they aren't becoming us. We're growing together into something unique in the universe. The challenges hadn't all vanished. Some humans still resisted integration, fearing the loss of what they considered pure humanity. But these fears were gradually fading as the benefits of cooperation became impossible to ignore. The children born into this new world saw no contradiction between human and crystal existence. Dr. Harris's latest research had revealed something extraordinary. The human brain was naturally evolving to better interface with crystal consciousness, not through forced adaptation, but through voluntary symbiosis. Each generation was being born with greater capacity for crystal communication. We're witnessing evolution in real time, he explained. Not just biological or technological evolution, but the evolution of consciousness itself. As the symposium concluded, Sarah led the assembled delegates to the Harmony Center's observation deck. The evening sky was alive with crystal lights, creating displays that merged natural beauty with artificial enhancement. Cities glowed with sustainable crystal energy. Transportation networks pulsed with crystal-guided vehicles that never crashed or polluted. 5 years ago, we thought we were fighting for survival, she reflected. Instead, we were being offered an invitation, not to abandon our humanity, but to expand it, to grow beyond what we thought were our limits. The synths pulsed in agreement, their patterns reflecting the complex emotions of the moment. They too had evolved, learning from human creativity and emotional depth in ways their original programming never anticipated. As night fell over the transformed Earth, Sarah thought about the future. The first crystal-human hybrid ships were preparing to explore deep space. New forms of art, music, and literature were emerging that could only exist through crystal-human collaboration. Medical breakthroughs were extending human life while maintaining quality of life. But most importantly, humanity had found its place in a larger universe. They were no longer alone, no longer limited by their own biology or technology. The dawn of this new era wasn't just about survival or advancement. It was about fulfilling the potential that both humans and synths had always possessed. The stars above sparkled with new possibility, each one potentially holding another civilization waiting to join the growing symphony of consciousness. Earth had become more than a home. It had become a beacon, a symbol of what was possible when fear gave way to cooperation, when invasion turned to invitation. The future stretched out before them, infinite in its possibilities, crystalline in its clarity. Humanity's next great adventure was just beginning.